All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
Hello and welcome to Primitive Screwheads Talk Horror Movies. And Andrew, I just want to let you know that there will be blood. Because I cut myself shaving this morning and it's still just kind of leaking out here and there. And then also there was a zit that I popped and it's all over and it's just really, really gross. So I just want to warn you, fair warning, there will be blood in this podcast, okay? Is that fine?
You know, it's a great transition into our new sponsor, the Dollar Shave Club. You can get your first month subscription for $5.99 if you use the code Screwheads.
Well, anyway, listeners, we are Andrew and Dan, and we are two friends who met over when we were teaching the kiddos over in South Korea back in 2013 to 2015. But we bonded over our love of horror movies, and we are still talking about it today, still messaging each other back and forth whenever something crops up or some opinion that one of us has that we want to share, and we decided to start a podcast about it. So this is our podcast, Primitive Screwheads Talk Horror Movies. Every week we get on over and we talk about a different movie. Thank you so much to the band Teddy's Atlas for our theme song. It's called Horror Movie Story, and you can find it off the album Children of the Corn. They're good Canadian boys. Please support them. Today's movie is the James Wan's masterpiece. Is it Wan? It's Wan. Okay, I'm going to edit that out. Okay, James Wang's masterpiece, The Conjuring 2, which is interesting because we have not reviewed the first one yet, because I have not seen the first one yet, which is very weird. Anyway, so why don't you, because, Andrew, you are definitely the, should I say James Wayne master here. Tell me a little bit about his career and what you know about him, because he's making some waves in the horror movie community, or he has been over the past couple of years.
Yeah, so he's, I think, one of the original directors and writers of the first Saw movie, which to me is probably the only good one in the series.
Agreed.
He also did that movie Dead Silence about the killer puppet lady back in 2007, which is pretty awesome.
I haven't even heard of that one.
He did the Insidious series. I think he directed 1 and 2, and then kind of was just a producer for 3 and 4.
Yeah.
And even though this aren't necessarily part of his Conjuring universe, they kind of started around the same time. And he recently just directed the Aquaman movie, which I've heard is actually pretty good.
Yeah, I heard it was a fun little romp too. And going back to Insidious, I've seen the first Insidious and I've seen the Conjuring 2, and definitely he's got this horror tone, horror style where I don't feel he necessarily does break out of new grounds. He doesn't do a lot of things very uniquely, but he does do the horror movie cliches and the stuff very, very well. Everything he's done, I feel, have always been very solid films, even if they really haven't pushed the boundaries of the horror medium, but they're very solid. And I really, really liked Insidious. I really, really like The Conjuring 2. And I'm excited to see more by him.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like a lot of his movies, even the ones that he's kind of a producer on, they almost kind of downplay the horror a lot. There's not there's really some nice violins in the background. There's some good music, but there's not a lot of jump scares. There's not a lot of gore. It's a lot of kind of the creep factor and the idea that a demon just kind of hanging out near you could be creepy, but it doesn't have to jump in your face.
Yeah, exactly. And he's got a lot of human elements to his movies as well, which I'm going to talk about specifically in The Conjuring 2 later on when we get to that section. But yeah, so today we are going to talk about that. James Wan, and he directed a movie called The Conjuring back in, I'm pulling it up, 2013. And I have not seen that movie. So Andrew, do you want to give me a little summary of that movie real quick?
Yeah, so basically it's just kind of our first outing with not Bill, what's his name? His name's not Bill. Ed and Lorraine Warren, thank you. As they kind of help this family in a almost Amityville-ish kind of setting. Basically, this family moves into a house and it's haunted, and there's without giving too many spoilers, there's a woman who had kind of a dark past and a dark incident, which her ghost is kind of terrorizing the family as a result of.
Now, Ed and Lorraine are based on two actual figures called Ed and Lorraine, who were paranormal hunters way back in the 60s, 70s. Yeah.
60s, 70s, yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
And we were talking a little bit, you actually read their book, correct?
Yeah, I read their book, The Demonologist, or Demonologist.
And what did you think of that one?
Like, at first I really liked it. Like, when I first saw The Conjuring, I was really kind of intrigued in this idea. Like, I've always kind of been intrigued by, I don't know, religion, even though I'm kind of an atheist. I am an atheist. I just really kind of enjoy the lore of it. And I thought the lore of the demonology sounded really kind of cool. But to me, it just felt like a lot of hot air. It felt like, kind of like, just, they seemed very full of themselves and almost trying to convince us that what they're doing is right. Like, Ed kind of came off as a man who thinks he's a superhero and would kind of just walk into a room and be like, hey, that creaky floorboard there is obviously because of a demon. Or like, you know, like I did some research and found out there was a guy who died here, so obviously his ghost is the problem. And it was very like trying to talk factually about like the things he did, but also kind of brushing off like, oh, I'm kind of awesome. I, you know, exercise this demon, you know, no big deal.
The light went out in the refrigerator, so obviously a demon. You know, there's a creaky step in the basement, obviously a demon, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and like, honestly, for me, it was a big letdown because I love Patrick Wilson as an actor, and I think Vera Farmiga does a great job, and I think they make these characters seem so much more understandable and believable in kind of how they present themselves than I felt their book did, which was kind of fun.
And that's, you know, the whole conundrum of the based on a true story, any sort of movie, but especially in horror movies where, you know, if a movie says based on true events, we're definitely expecting that at least half of it is to be greatly exaggerated, to say it mildly. But I do like the premise of the Conjuring films. They're basically these two paranormal Sherlock Holmes characters who go around and they solve people. But the anthology aspect of it, they can go on their own little self-contained adventure and still be connected. But, you know, I saw Conjuring 2 without having seen the first, and I did not feel lost at all. It's a very self-contained film, and I felt it's a great jumping-off point for a franchise, which they did, because we have the Annabelle and the Annabelle sequel, which is loosely based off the first movie, spun off right there. And then we also have the Nun as well, which is based off the antagonist in this film, The Conjuring 2. And I really feel they do a good job with embellishing the universe and establishing the universe and just breaking into these little tiny parts. So I think it's a great popcorn horror movie franchise where it doesn't do a lot of things new, but it does the old things very, very well.
I agree. I feel like it kind of brings back the old haunted house movie. Like, I don't really think we have many of those these days, and I think that it's kind of like a pure ghost movie. That's kind of what I liked about this and Insidious. I feel like they're just pure kind of ghost demon movies, which you don't really get much anymore. We get these very contrived kind of demon movies where like the Bye Bye Man shit, where like it's like these teen flicks where they kind of are running away from the Bye Bye Man or the Wish Upon thing. And I think that it's a very kind of pure and kind of like classic horror that they're coming back to.
Yeah. And, you know, they're not trying to say some sort of big, deeper meaning or some cosmic horror or, you know, really, really, really drag down the audience with, in terms of how depressing everything is. Like, I saw Hereditary, and that movie just absolutely killed me. Amazing movie, but God, it was so depressing. This one, I mean, I saw it, and I picked it out. My girlfriend and I had a horror movie dates, and we wanted to pick out some lighthearted horror movies. And honestly, Conjuring 2, I mean, it's got some tense scenes, but overall, it's got a very happy ending, and it's a very feel-good ending, and that's what I kind of like about it. There's some really feel-good scenes about it, too. It's got heart. It's got a lot of heart, and I like that.
Well, when I feel like that's what a lot of James Wan's kind of horror movies have done, especially the Conjuring and Insidious universe. I think a lot of it's about family. Even Insidious, like up to Insidious 4, which was a piece of shit. I can't remember it very well, but I still feel like there's a big theme of family and kind of the idea that, you know, coming together and working together was really important. And so I'm really impressed with that aspect of his films. I'm wondering if Aquaman has any of that. Patrick Wilson is actually back again in Aquaman, so James Wan clearly loves him.
Yeah, so he did a fantastic job in this movie. So,
cool. Oh yes, he did.
All right, so you ready to jump on into the story of The Conjuring 2?
Sounds good.
So the movie starts off in 1976, and we've got our two heroes, Ed and Lorraine Warren, our ghost-busting married couple, and they've got a little cameo scene at the very, very beginning where they're investigating the famous Amityville murders at the Amityville house. Lorraine kind of goes into this, what would you call it, a trance, a past life sort of thing, where basically she goes into the memory of the murder of the Amityville horror when he kills his entire family. during sentence, that's the word I'm looking for. During that sentence, when Lorraine is basically in the ghost realm, reliving these memories, she comes across a freaky nun. A very,
Wait,
very...
You mean seance?
Seance, yeah, that's what it's called.
Okay, there we go. Sorry.
Yeah. Hey, listen, man, I've got the Wikipedia summary pulled up right here, okay? If it says seance, I'm going to trust whatever Wikipedia says, despite what my college professor says.
Okay.
So that's that right there. So they go into the basement, and she gets this premonition of her husband's not having a very good day by the fact that he is impaled by a goddamn tree. She wakes up, freaks out, says, listen, we can't keep doing this anymore. It's going to kill you. Eventually, it's too dangerous. And so establishes our kind of motivation for Lorraine right there. Now, the first movie was not about the Amityville Horrors, right?
No.
Okay. So that was one thing I was confused about when I started saying it. I was just like, oh, they're throwing a throwback to the first movie. But okay, so it's not that. All right. No. So after that opening scene, we move on over to Enfield, England, which is a suburb in East England or a borough or whatever the term is. And we meet this family. It's a family of 4 kids, single mother, father left a long time ago. She's trying to make it work. I remember the movie plays London Calling by The Clash because that's obviously the only establishing song you can use when you're talking about London. And I really like the setting. Like, I felt that's something that a lot of horror movies have not explored. A low, downtrodden London setting, and it establishes a lot of the tone for the movie, where the kids are talking in slang, and they've got their school uniforms, and, you know, the kid is always asking for biscuits, and it's got this very English tone to it all, and I really like that. It brings something new, it brings something different, it kind of helps and establishes it on its own. So, yeah. So what is the big problem that happens in this movie? What's going on in this house?
Good question. Well, so I think the first time we really kind of see anything going on is at night when the 2 daughters are kind of going to bed, and they start hearing some voices. The youngest daughter, I believe, Janet, starts talking to somebody kind of in her room, who at one point kind of almost possesses her and starts speaking through her, saying that the house is theirs and they need to leave the house.
Okay, now I got a question for you. That David Cassidy poster on the wall, did you think that was the ghost at first?
Bro, I can't even know what you're talking about.
There was a poster of David Cassidy on their wall. Do you not know who David Cassidy is?
I'm not going to lie, I have no idea.
Oh, man. The Partridge Family?
So I know that was a thing.
That was a thing. They were basically the Brady Bunch, except they were a musical band, and apparently all the girls in the 70s were, like, obsessed. Like, it was basically the NSYNC of the 70s. I only know because my mom was a huge fan of David Cassidy, but yes.
Wait, weren't the Brady Bunch a musical group?
No, the Brady Bunch was not a musical group. But they kind of
For some reason, I thought they played songs at one point in the Brady Bunch movie.
They might have. I don't know. We'll talk about that on our Brady Bunch podcast. But anyway, so yeah, Janet, who is played by, I'm going to pull her up right here, Madison Wolfe.
Oh, and she's great.
Oh, she was phenomenal in this movie. So she plays the girl who gets possessed, the youngest daughter of the group. Who this ghost who is haunting their home decides to possess. And she does an amazing job with the creepy voices. I mean, I'm sure that was edited in post, but she does a great job with her body language. She does a great job with her poses. She does a great job with appearing as such a scared, terrified, abused little girl, honestly. And it's really, yeah, she does an amazing job. But yeah, so eventually, you know, they're hearing voices. The older sister's a little bit concerned, but it keeps going. And I remember there's one scene where Janet says, you know what, hey, I haven't gotten a lot of sleep. I'm not feeling well. Can I stay home from school today? And she does. And she's sitting on the couch, flipping through the TV, going back and forth. Margaret Thatcher's on one of them. And she hears this voice, this angry Cockney old man voice saying, "Get out of my house, get out of my house," over and over and over again. And then there's this great jump scare where he actually appears over her shoulder, screaming right in her head with his yellow teeth and his yellow eyes, screaming, "Get out!" And then that's that. So we have our established house is haunted by this cockney old man who just wants his house back. And what do you think of that?
I loved it. I thought that scene was like really tense.
Yeah.
Like how he kept changing back to the channel. Like I'd seen it. Like I watched it recently, and I'd seen it when it first came out, and like I forgot what was going to happen. Like I knew she was going to die or anything, but I was like, on the edge of my seat, waiting for something to happen.
Yeah, and James Wan is really Wan. Oh my God, James Wan is really, really good with just setting up that tension. It's another thing, it's a jump scare. You know it's coming. But he does it so well. Like, I was expecting something to pop up on the TV, but no, it cuts away, quick establishing shot. He is right there taking up half the screen behind her shoulder. It's really, really good. It actually reminded me a lot of the Darth Maul scene in Insidious, where they're just sitting around the table talking a little bit, and then the guy pops up over the other guy's shoulder right there.
I love that scene.
Yeah, it's a good one. So anyway, we got that. Janet is completely terrified of this old man, and what was the one event that forces them to go to the neighbors? Was it the kitchen scene?
So it was. I'm trying to remember. Was that the scene where? Because the mother finally believes it.
Yeah, she believes her really fast, actually. Which was a subversion I really like, because usually it's, she's just a kid, she's just saying things, but no, this family does not waste any time in getting the fuck out of that house.
Is it like when the chair and stuff starts flying around?
That's part of it, but that's when the police were called. There's something that happens, I don't remember what it is, but the mom and everyone decide to go to the neighbor's house and call the police, and then they go back inside the house, and then that's when the chair starts moving, and that goes to...
I think it's one of the times when they're in the bedroom and the mother kind of comes in because the sister's freaking out, and then they hear like the voice kind of screams like, "You're in my house."
Oh yeah,
this is my house.
And
then then they think somebody's in there, and that's when they call the police.
Yeah, and then they run straight to the neighbors, call the police, and that was the time. It's just like, okay, yep, we're done. And then this ghost does not give a fuck. Like the police are there, they're knocking on the walls, and they're just like, all right, if anyone's in here, come on out. And then just right in, moves the chair, slams it against the wall, bam. That's that right there.
Well, and that's what I really like about, I feel like, James Wan. Like, you already kind of mentioned that, like, they kind of just run right out of there and the mother gets it quickly. Mm-hmm. But I feel like in his films, the people are pretty smart. Mm-hmm. They're not idiots. Like, they don't naysay a lot. Mm-hmm. They're not like, oh no, this can't be true. Like, in Insidious, as soon as, like, the house, they're like, oh, the house kind of possessed, they move. Mm-hmm. Like, in this, as soon as they realize what's going on, they get the fuck out of there and they call the police. Mm-hmm. Like, there's that kind of weird scene where the police kind of just walk out after they see it, which is kind of comedic, where they're just like, well, we don't know what we can do.
We can file a report.
Like,
time, exactly.
It makes sense.
They're just like, yeah, this is way above our pay grade. Sorry, not happening.
Yeah, it's a little funny, but it's also, at the same time, like, what would a police officer do? Yeah. Be like, I'm going to shoot it. Like,
well, I mean, they're British. They really don't have guns, so.
There we go. True.
Yeah, if it was set in America, that's that. But I like it, too, because there really isn't an escape for this family because they're living in poverty. They can't afford the luxury of moving to a new place. They're depending on the support of their neighbors, so that makes them feel even more trapped in that instance. So it's pretty good. But yeah.
What I also like in thinking about it, like, I don't feel like we really see very often. Like, they're living in a duplex. Like, we don't really see very often when, like, this horror strikes in the middle of a very populated town and, like, everybody, like, they share a wall with a neighbor. Mm-hmm. Like, I think that's actually kind of rare for a horror movie. I'm trying to think of what is another example of that. Like, maybe sometimes, like, apartment complexes, but that's kind of isolating in itself because it's kind of, like, a single house among many in one building. But this is kind of, like, out in the open. Yeah. Like, the house isn't isolated. The kids can be seen. Like, if, somebody fell out that window, they'd see it.
Yeah. I wonder what the next door neighbors were thinking the whole time. Just be like, oh, God, that woman's screaming about getting out of the house again.
Damn.
Yeah, I know. So
I just think it's like really rough sex or something.
Yeah, must be. Either that or just...
It's gotta be.
Yeah. So, we're moving on that one right there, and eventually they decide to... The local London paranormal chapter gets wind of this incident, and then they decide to have a news interview about it, where Janet sits on down, and this newscaster tries talking to Old Man Bill, who is the guy who was possessing the entire house. And there's this really, really good scene, and once again, the actress who plays Janet does an amazing job where she just kind of sits there and she tilts her head forward and she looks up at him and says, "It's my house," in this really, really angry old cockney old man voice. Lights go out. Once again, this demon does not give a fuck. Newscast, he's on camera, he doesn't care. He's just like, let's go, let's do this. So yeah. That's that. He states that he enjoys tormenting the family, and he really, really wants his home. Simple motivation, all of that right there. But this is the time when the Warrens come on in because they get wind of what's going on in this movie, or what's going on in this story. Oh, this poor house is being haunted, and the Catholic Church is the one who approaches them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're saying, okay, you just go on over, you talk about it, you scope it out, see how it is, but you're basically an unofficial eyes of the church, because we don't want to get involved in this. We don't want to get involved in possession. If it actually is a possession, just, give us the low key and we'll make a decision based on there. So they do. They go on over, and at this point, I remember there's a really, really cool scene where the Warrens come on over, and we get to see how they're dealing with all the spooky stuff. Because at one point in the movie, Janet does try living in the neighbor's house, but she still gets possessed, and she still ends up in her bedroom with the David Cassidy poster, and she still works on that right there.
Well, actually, it's, or just to backtrack a little bit,
go for it.
Just before we get to kind of the Warrens coming over, I think one thing that kind of happens to them is we kind of see what happens to them after their fame, after their big event with the Amityville Horror House. And we kind of see that they basically been doing circuits since then. Like the Amityville Horror, they kind of took a break after that, Vera Farmiga or Lorraine suggested. And we kind of see that at that point, they're getting a lot of kind of pushback. They're getting a lot of people who don't believe them, and they're kind of going on press conferences and getting basically in shouting matches with the people who are hosting them.
Oh, yeah.
And so kind of a lot of their motivation to go on this trip is that Ed, part of the reason he's pushing for it is he wants to kind of legitimize his profession.
Yeah.
He wants to be like, no, this is real. And, they basically say that this is the British version of the Amityville Horror. And so that's what kind of draws them. They think that it's a chance to kind of redeem themselves in a way, to kind of get back in the public eye. And Ed's kind of taking it as a chance to show everybody what he can do and show that he's real, basically.
Yeah, and that's a great field of motivation for him because it causes tension with his wife, who, is still clearly remembering that vision of him being impaled by that tree in the opening scene, and she is going back and forth saying, "Oh, Ed, please, we can't do this. It's too dangerous, blah, blah, blah. Let's just retire. Let's do our own thing. Let's take the easy jobs." But he, being, Ed Warren / Patrick Wilson, is all gung-ho about it. And I felt that was a very natural way of putting this married couple at odds, even though they're still supporting each other and still taking each other into consideration. At that point, they're both worried about different things. And I liked that little bit of tension in there.
Well, and before they head over, too, that's also when we get the scene where she sees the nun again, right? The painting scene.
Oh, yes. Okay, so let's pause there for a second, because this is honestly my... Okay, so I'm going to wrap into an anecdote in here, because this is my favorite scene in the entire movie.
Yeah, of course.
So, after we get a whole bunch of scenes with spooky stuff happening to Janet in the house over in London, we switch back to the Warrens household. And Lorraine comes on over, talks to Patrick a little bit, Ed, who is painting this creepy-ass picture of that nun, and says, "Oh, I just saw it in a dream one day and decided to paint it." And I don't know about you, but if that happened to me, and I woke up and I saw someone painting that creepy-ass picture, I would be like, all right, let's burn it. Done.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was...
Yeah, I agree.
I love the design of the nun. It's just a really... so
oh, my
good.
gosh.
So that's what happens right there. There's this scene at the breakfast table where... Did they establish they had a daughter in the first movie, or is that something new?
I believe they established that they did.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, they did. Because at one point, a demon attacks her.
Okay, gotcha.
It actually picks up the animal doll and chases her around with it.
Gotcha. All right. Yeah, because I remember I was sitting in the theater when I saw that scene, and daughter comes on out, and I remember thinking to myself, oh, is she a ghost? Is she going to attack? Because they just sit there and they don't talk to her for like a good 5 seconds. And then she finally speaks up, and then they talk to her normally. And I was just like, oh, okay, good. This is not a scary thing that's happening. It's just a premonition. This is a safe scene. Nothing scary is going to happen on this one. Sounds good. And I remember I stood up, and I went to the bathroom at this point. And then I came back in, and I saw the scene later on YouTube, and I saw it again when I saw it a couple weeks ago. But their daughter is standing in this hallway, this abnormally long hallway, points over to Lorraine and says, Mom, who's that? And then she points down the hallway, and the creepy nun is there. And she's just staring.
That was great.
And it's like, it's so Shining-esque in terms of just standing there and then slowly walks away. I remember I walked right back into the theater as the camera zoomed in on the nun, and I was just like, holy shit. I was walking back to my seat, and I still jumped. But my favorite scene in the entire movie, why don't you go ahead and describe what happens once she gets into the study?
All right, so so Lorraine's kind of sitting down, taking a wee little nap by herself, and she kind of has one of her premonitions, I'd almost say, and she walks down. Isn't the study? Is that where she ends up going?
Yeah, she ends up going to the study / office or whatever it is. But
yeah, and it's all kind of dark there, and on the wall is this painting, and she starts to see this kind of shadow kind of going across the wall. She'd already kind of seen that on a little bit.
Yeah.
And the shadow kind of goes across the wall, and it kind of lines up with the painting so that the shadows kind of head and shoulders occupy kind of the space of the portrait.
Oh, the tension is so good. We have no idea what's going to happen, but still it's just like, it's not going to be good.
And then you just hear this like kind of like almost cracking noise as these like spiny fingers pull out and grab the edge of the frame. And you have the kind of like holy shit moment where you kind of like, oh fuck, like this is happening. And then she just fucking charges her.
Like a linebacker. It's so good. Ugh.
And it's so fucking effective because like I thought the same thing when I first saw that Annabelle. There's a similar scene where she kind of one of the main girl kind of sees a premonition of some girl kind of across the hallway. And she's just standing there and like, oh, this is scary. But I don't know, man. When somebody fucking goes whole hog and just sprints at you, it's fucking terrifying.
Especially when this nun has not been moving fast this entire movie. Like, even in the basement scene, she's just kind of wandering around here and there. Like, fast stuff happens around her, but the nun itself, not so much. Yeah, so that's that. And then she falls into the basement from the premonition at the very beginning of the movie again. And sees Ed getting wood again, and by that I mean getting impaled again, and wakes up again, and it really, really establishes again, oh, this is something that's probably going to crop up later. It's an again and again moment. So, and then the key thing is once she wakes up, she starts ripping up her Bible that she had in her lap on the couch and just keeps on writing miscellaneous letters on there. And the really cool thing about this scene, and I didn't notice it until my second watch, the way they defeat the demon at the very end of the movie is to say its name. And there are 3 instances in this scene where the demon's name is actually in the house. It's spelled out in the kitchen, right under the window. There is 5 different letters on the wallpaper that spell out its name. It's also in the bookcase when she wakes up. And there's one more in the study. It's right by a globe where the 5 letters of the demon's name are spelled out right there. So subconsciously, James already imprints that, hey, this is the demon's name. So when it's actually revealed, I kind of had a familiar moment, like, hey, wait a second, didn't I see that name before?
Well, it's actually funny because I remember when I was watching that scene. When I watch movies, I'm a big I like to stare at the scenery.
Yeah.
And like the first time I saw it, I saw that and I was like, what the fuck does that mean? I'm like, what? Like I thought they were blocking off some letters or something like that. So like I was just so like I was kind of reading. I'm like, oh, it's like somebody in their family. Is their daughter's name? Like, are there letters missing that I just can't see off screen? And like it's just obviously like their daughter's craft project.
Yeah.
So when that came at the end, I was like, oh shit! Like
yeah, and it was
so
equally
well
as
set up.
effective too because it's just it's some great foreshadowing and this movie is filled with a whole bunch of moments like that because I remember one of the spooky moments when the house is being haunted at the very, very beginning of the movie over in London. There's this scene where I can't remember if it's the youngest son who wants the biscuits or if it's Janet, but I think it's the youngest son. He gets a glass of water from the kitchen. walks right past the living room, and then out of focus to the side, you can see the old man sitting in the chair. The camera doesn't even pan towards it. Doesn't even make reference of it, but you can see it out of the corner of your eye, and just, it's so good.
Yeah, that subtle horror is amazing.
Yeah, it reminds me of the scene from Insidious where the boy is just facing the wall by the laundry machine.
Wall by the laundry machine. Let me think about that.
So
Scap to me.
Okay, so the scene in Insidious where the boy's dancing. And Tiny Tim thing. Yeah, and the mom's wearing it on through and she's doing the laundry and everything like that. There's a scene where she passes right through the laundry room and there's this boy standing right by the laundry machine with his face to the wall. And it's the blink and you miss it moments, but it's just, it's so good.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Warrens are being haunted by this nun. The British family is being haunted by this cockney old man. And at this point, that's when the Warrens decide to take this case. Catholic Church comes on in, says, listen, you go out to England, you do your thing, you report back to us. We want you to be the eyes and the ears of the church. Unofficially, of course, but that's that. Yep, that's that. So, at this point, this is when things really kick into high gear, because we've got two paranormal investigator professionals, Ed and Lorraine, coming on in, and they know their stuff. And immediately, they sit Janet down and have an interrogation. But before that, there's this really good scene that I really, really like, where Lorraine goes out to the backyard and sits down with Janet on the swing. And at this point in the movie, the family's been haunted by this old man ghost for a few weeks now. And you can tell it's clearly taking the toll. The rest of the family, except for Mom and Janet, is living with the neighbors across the street because Janet's possessed and she is putting the neighbors in danger as well. So she has to stay in the house. And the family really, really misses them. And Janet, you can see in her face, she is so tired all the time. She is completely beaten, and it's really terrifying because it's just this sad little girl, and the mom is so beaten and so tired as well. The house is a complete mess. The bedroom, I believe, is just completely thrown apart, and
the crosses everywhere.
Yeah, the big crosses everywhere. They're just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks at this point. But Lorraine comes on down and sits next to Janet, who is at this point basically giving up, and she says, hey, I know what you're going through. And this is something where maybe because I didn't see the first movie, I was missing a lot of the backstory, but what exactly are Lorraine's powers? She's more in tune to life and death. She can see ghosts. She can see dead people. What's...
I think she just can kind of travel into the ghost realm. She can see ghosts. She can be aware of ghosts. Like, she's more of kind of like she'd be kind of the support mage in this class, and Ed's kind of the fighter, I suppose. Like, he's the brawler character in the party.
Yeah, I can see him being a fighter. No, he's a cleric. There we go. He's a cleric. That's what he does. He's got the religious aspect to him. He's got the cross around him, and he's still big and burly. But yeah. So, okay. So yeah, it's a really, really good scene where they talk about this, and there's this really good line where Lorraine talks about how when she was growing up, she saw things or she felt things that people didn't believe her about it. And one day she finally met someone who did believe all of this paranormal stuff that she was experiencing. And then Janet goes, well, what did you do? And she goes, well, I married him. And I remember I saw them there and I audibly went, aww.
Yeah, that was a sweet scene.
And that's one thing that I really like is sprinkled into this movie is James is not afraid to shy away from moments like that, those tender, heart-filled moments. Like, overall, I mean, this is a movie where no one dies. Everything returns to normal at the end for the most part. There are some tense scenes. There are definitely some great jump scares, but in the end, it is what it is. And the good guys win pretty single-handedly. Like, there's no sacrifices made whatsoever. But, what was I going to say? Yeah, and just little moments like that. And at this point, Ed and Lorraine decide to do their investigation, and they decide to do an interview with Mr. Bill, the old man ghost, with a whole bunch of other paranormal investigators in play. And do you want to talk about that scene for a little bit, or you got another opinion?
Oh no, sure, I'll go with that. Yeah. So they have the interview, and they decide to make sure that she's not lying. They have her put water in her mouth, kind of sip some water and hold it in her mouth, to make sure that she isn't doing, what do you call that thing with the puppet?
Ventriloquism. Yep.
There you go, ventriloquism. Yeah. Basically, because their first thing they have to do is just prove that it's real. Like, that's their goal, is to go and prove that it's not a hoax. So they have this conversation with her, where they have to face away from her, and they ask her questions, and then Bill will reply. And I don't believe we get too much out of that, aside from basically Bill just saying, like, get out of my house, this is my house.
I think we learned his name at this point.
Yes, that's true.
And that's that right there. And then also, we continue.
No, I think do you have something to say?
I really like the cinematography in the scene. It's all one big establishing shot. Ed Warren is in the front frame, and Janet is sitting on the chair in the back. They're both in the single shot. Janet goes, oh, he won't come out unless you turn around. So they decide, okay, fine, we'll turn around. And the camera focuses in on Ed's face. And then the background is a little bit blurry, and it gets more and more blurry as the scene goes on, and as it gets darker and darker and darker. And I don't know what trickery James did to figure this out, because I know he used very minimal CGI in this movie. But as he's talking, and as Janet's voice gets more and more distorted and kind of anamorphs its way into Bill, the figure in the back sitting on the chair gets bigger as well. And it's a very gradual, slow change, but it's a really, really cool and really, really effective one. I remember sitting in the theater looking at it and it's like, wait a second, is that? No, she wasn't that big, was she? Oh my god, she's physically transforming into Bill. That is awesome. And is it that point where, we get the one piece of the puzzle, in terms of the big twist with Bill at the very, very end. But we'll get to that later.
Oh, yes.
So that's what happens. She transforms back into Janet, spits that water out, and at this point, Ed and Lorraine are convinced. She is completely authentic. This is an actual haunting. Ed gets really excited. Hey, now this is time to reestablish my credibility. And Lorraine gets even more and more worried. But it's dangerous. We can't do this. Blah, blah, blah. And then they decide to stay in the house and see this thing through until the end. And this is another one of my favorite scenes in the movie, the Christmas scene, where the family comes on over. They decide, you know what, it's Christmas. Let's go ahead. Let's get the family back together. Let's see if they're happy about it. And Ed Warren tries to fix their record player, but it's not working. I don't think it was a ghost. I think it was the ex-husband. I don't know. It could be. If this was an actual book written by the actual Ed Warren, I'm sure they would have said, yeah, then the ghost broke the record player. But he instead brings out a guitar and plays I Can't Help Falling in Love with You by Presley, and the kids all sit around and they sing along to it. And you know, Patrick Wilson, he was a Broadway star. He was in Phantom of the Opera, so he knows how to play his stuff, and he knows how to sing really well, too.
Yeah, he does.
And there's this great scene where Lorraine is just staring at him, and she's just like, God, I love this man. And then Ed looks up and stares back at her and says, yeah, baby, I love you, too. And it's a really tender moment. It's a really, really sweet moment. And going back to the swing scene from earlier with Lorraine and Janet, I'm not afraid that... I like the fact that those types of scenes are included in this movie. It gives it a lot more heart, it gives it a lot more character, and it develops these characters a lot more too. So,
yeah, well, and like you mentioned too, like the guitar was their father's, and it was kind of the symbol of kind of their broken home. I believe the guitar was broken as well.
Yeah,
and so so him doing that was kind of him, again retuning the family. It's that kind of it was like it was maybe kind of a little on the nose, but it was a nice touch, kind of showing that this was his way of helping the family. I think Ed even says at one point, he's like, sometimes, like, when you're experiencing this trauma, experiencing this terrible thing, you don't think about the people. You don't think about, like, helping yourself and making sure that you're okay.
Yeah.
And that was part of what his goal was. He's like, part of this kind of our treatment, part of what we're doing here is making sure that you guys are okay and that the people who are experiencing these things don't feel alone and don't feel separated.
Yeah, because both of them, both Ed and Lorraine, experienced paranormal events when they were younger, and they went through the exact same thing they did. This London family did, and they emphasize with it. They understand how it is. So it's a pretty cool scene. I liked it. It was just the right amount of cheese for me.
Yeah.
And then we get into the big twist.
Well, before we do that, should we go through any of the other kind of, because there are a few little haunting scenes in between there. Are there any that stand out to you that we should talk about?
I liked the scene. Actually, I think that comes at the climax of the movie where Janet pops up on the ceiling. Was that the climax of the movie?
Well, you mean when she's tied up, when she ties herself and pops up on the ceiling?
Yes,
or?
When she ties herself and pops up on the ceiling. No, because that's when they break into the bedroom
on.
For the first time. Because they end up locking the bedroom, just completely 100% locking it. And then Janet, at one point, she ties herself to a bedpost in her mom's room. And then she disappears through the floor at one point, and then wakes up and she's on the ceiling. Cockney old man sitting in his dead chair, the chair he died in, looks up at her, walks upstairs to the bedroom, and then pulls her through the floor again. And then that's how she ends up locked in the bedroom. And then that's when Ed and Lorraine have to break down the door and basically try and get her out of there. So it was a tense scene. It was a good scene. I liked it.
Yeah. Well, I also really liked the scene with the dog.
Yeah.
Where the boy, I think it's the biscuit scene you're talking about, where he gets up and goes get water, and then he hears the dog ring the bell. They kind of established earlier that their neighbor's dog will hit a bell with his paw when he wants to go outside. So he walks the dog out, and as he's standing there, the dog transforms into the Crooked Man, which is kind of a fictitious little kind of fable or limerick that they have.
Yeah.
In this old kind of, what are those spinning things called?
Spectroscope, something like that.
And it kind of sings that song that pops up, and it's kind of like it's not really scary, but it's kind of creepy. The way he just kind of pulls himself out, he's like very Jack Skellington like, very long.
Okay,
I thought that was really effective.
So I'm sure you know the background information and you've researched like the production notes and everything like this. But what did you think of the actual like Crooked Man movement and how it appeared and how he morphed in from the dog to the Crooked Man? Did you think that looked authentic? Did you think that looked good? Did you feel like it meshed in well with the tone of the movie?
It did feel, to me, it felt a little cartoony, like a little, but on a terrible way. I thought that his later, the scenes he gets later, I don't like seeing him as much as I do later, because I think the color of his hat just looks really kind of weird. The like awkward, like purple hat is a little awkward.
Yeah.
But I think that it kind of to me, I kind of almost saw it as childlike, because in this case it's the youngest son who's seeing it the first time,
and it is a child's toy that he comes from. So
so it's taking on that kind of child scariness, like that grotesque, like almost like the clown thing, kind of the uncanny valley of like kind of childlike happy but then grotesque. So I thought it was really effective for that reason.
No, the reason why I brought that up is all the Reddit threads after this movie was released were saying, oh, the CGI when he transforms into the human looks so fake, and the Crooked Man CGI was so fake, and all of that stuff right there. But it was actually stop motion, a combination of stop motion and practical effects. Doug Jones, I believe his name is.
Wait, it's Doug Jones?
Let me look that up. I'm pretty sure it is, yeah.
That's awesome.
No, I'm sorry. Javier Bote. He was the really, really tall, creepy woman in Wreck. He was the Slender Man in the new Slender Man movie. But basically he does a lot of he was Mama in Mama. But yeah, he does a lot of very similar stuff to Doug Jones. Very similar roles in that in terms of the awkward, creepy movements, that sort of thing. But yeah, apparently the transformation was all stop motion. I mean, it was mostly silhouetted, so pretty easy. And then the creepy movements back and forth, that was also that as well. I think they turned the frames per second down on that one. But yeah, it was all authentic. So I always thought that was kind of interesting.
That is awesome.
Yeah. So that's that right there. So those are the two scares that happen right there. Decent scares, decent jump scares, decent tense moments. But then we get to the real climax of the movie where we find out there's a scene in the kitchen that happens. And are we ready to get into that, or you got more thoughts?
Oh, no, we're good.
Okay. So there's a scene later on in the kitchen where they set up recording devices all over the entire house, including one in the garden, looking straight into the kitchen. And hijinks ensue. There's another haunting that happens. Janet disappears for a while, ends up in some pipes, almost kills Biscuit Boy. But the important thing is they review the tapes after this haunting is over, after the spook is over, and they find out that they have video evidence of Janet actually breaking stuff in the kitchen, which leads these other two paranormal investigators, who are not the Warrens, to believe she's faking it. This whole thing is a hoax. Janet was just being a dumb little kid, trying to do all that right there. So they call it off. They say, listen, this is obviously a hoax. We can't do anything for you. I'm sorry. And all the paranormal investigators leave while Mom is basically just really pissed and saying, all right, if you're not going to help, then you're not allowed in my house. Bye. See ya.
So, actually, just to kind of pause there, I believe, I'm kind of looking at the cast. I believe it's Maurice Grosse, who is one of the other paranormal investigators. Mm-hmm. He doesn't kind of give up on them. Because they're about to leave, and he's like, who's going to help these people? Mm-hmm. Because, Ed Warren, and they kind of say they're going to leave. Mm-hmm. And I kind of wish that his character was a little bit more present, because he almost kind of seems like the hero of the story in a way. Like he could have turned into the hero of the story, because he's one of the older investigators who come with them to kind of prove that it's true. Yeah. And he never once doubts that they're telling the truth.
Yeah. Maurice is kind of the good angel on the Warren's shoulder, and then Anita Gregory, who's the other paranormal investigator, she's all, yeah, they're faking it. Sorry, can't happen. We're outside. We're out like a Girl Scout. So yeah. He's a character that's kind of been regaled to the background, but he does have some... I agree. And then he gives them the equipment that they used to solve this puzzle on the train, right?
Oh, is he the one who gives them the recordings?
So, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, the Warrens are on the train, heading back to the airport, sitting there when Lorraine has an idea. They take the two recordings, the one recording they got from the interview with Bill when he's sitting on the chair, when Janet's got the water in his mouth, and then another recording from the kitchen scene where Janet appears in the pipes at the very end. And they realize that it's actually two halves of the same sentence, and then they combine them together using their primitive 70s technology that probably took them way more time to fiddle with than the movie actually showed. But we hear Bill screaming out, "Help me, it won't let me go. Help me, it won't let me go," over and over again, where the big twist in the movie is Bill is not the real antagonist. He's being manipulated by someone, some otherworldly presence. And that's when Lorraine makes the connection that it's that goddamn nun.
Goddamn nun.
Goddamn nun. So
nun.
They run out of the train. It starts storming. They head on over, and that's when the big showdown is. They return to the Hodgson residence. Janet's possessed again, and she locks herself up in the bedroom. The rest of the family is completely evicted from the house, and that's when Ed decides to go through the basement. And I just had another thought, too. I really love this climax because the house that they live in has been so established at this point. We know the layout exactly. It's a tiny little house with just a kitchen, a living room, and 3 bedrooms, and that's it. And then a basement that's flooding. But we have gotten to know the house so well at this point that during this climax, when Ed basically starts his way to the bottom and moves his way to the top, we know exactly where he is. We know exactly what his goal is. We know exactly where he's going. I mean, the house is basically a character in itself at this point. And it coming back and having him traverse the entire place for the climax was a great idea. I really liked it. So Ed and Lorraine go on down to the basement. Door's locked. Ed works his way through. Or I'm sorry, it's not locked yet. Ed works his way through, Then it gets locked behind, and Ed and Lorraine get separated, and they share their little tender moment where they say they love each other and he'll be safe and all that stuff right there. And then Lorraine goes back to the front, and bam, lightning strikes. There's a big-ass tree right in the right in the yard that looks exactly like the one that impales Ed in her vision. So...
Well, actually, at this point, did you think Ed was going to die?
No, I don't think so, because I don't know, I didn't feel like it. I mean, it was definitely a tense scene, but I felt it was a little bit too on the nose for that, and especially for, a James Wan movie. Yeah, I didn't think so. Did you think so?
I think I knew it wasn't going to, but I don't know. I feel like with me, like if there's a character that I really like in a movie and they hint that they might die, I become terrified that they're going to die. I'm just
and
like,
usually
shit, if you kill this character, I'm going to be pissed.
And usually when a movie does that, like they have their little tender last moment where they talk to their loved ones and say, "Don't worry, I'll be okay." That's amping up the tension right there. So, I mean, definitely they were trying to get there. They were trying to get at it. But what happens is, what happens in the basement there? So he makes his way through, and then what happens after that, Andrew?
I think. Let's see. So he makes his way through. I don't believe he encounters anything inside the basement, does he? I know
he does
earlier
not.
in the scene he does. So he basically sees that there's kind of a waterlogged piece of roof or floor above him. So he basically just rips through it with his bare hands, which really makes you wonder how fucking secure that floor is. Like,
yeah, it is a house that's falling apart.
That's true.
It is a house that's falling apart, but...
So he basically pulls himself up through that, and as he does, the demon kind of twists the handle off of a valve for a steam pipe or for the heating, and he basically just gets sprayed in the face with piping hot water, which momentarily blinds him. And we get to see a good couple minutes of him making his way upstairs.
And there's a couple shots of him just kind of blindly making his way through, and then the Crooked Man pops up behind him, too. But the Crooked Man doesn't do anything. He's just like, "Hey, I'm here. I'm still here. I'm still scary."
Well, no, he does a lot of damage, doesn't he? He bursts out of the teepee and rips up the entire fucking top of the house, and then kind of chases him down. The Crooked Man's pretty present. He acts a lot. At least I thought he did it.
Well, once they get to the upstairs, yeah.
Oh, sorry, you're talking before.
Yeah, they're in the kitchen. He's just kind of staring and oh, here's more attention on that one. So, but yeah.
Yeah, so then Ed makes his way up, bumps into the Crooked Man, And to me, that's when the Crooked Man kind of fell apart. When you see his face, he looks very comical.
Yeah, he's got those big fang teeth and all that.
And the weird hat that his eyes are poking through. It's, I don't know, it almost looks like a Pokemon to me a little bit.
Yeah.
It's just kind of awkward. And I know they're making a movie. It's one of the next movies coming up, is the Crooked Man film. And I'm curious if they're going to, change him a little bit. Like maybe make his hat a little bit darker, or maybe make him remove the hat to show something else.
It's going to be a crossover with Detective Pikachu. Detective Pikachu is going to solve all the murders the Crooked Man has committed, and Danny DeVito is going to voice Pikachu. So Ryan Reynolds is pissed off about that, but it is what it is. So,
dude, I'm not gonna lie, I would watch the shit out of that.
Oh, I would,
especially because if it's a hard R Pokemon movie, yeah, Pikachu literally shocked the shit out of the devil, just fucking thunderbolt him, done. Great.
Anyway, so Ed gets up to the top floor, and what happens there?
So Ed gets up there and he sees the youngest daughter, not his youngest daughter, youngest daughter,
youngest daughter.
Janet, and she's perched kind of on the edge of the windowsill in their room, and is basically looking down at that tree that was earlier hit by lightning, kind of looking to jump off the edge and impale herself on it. And Ed, hero that he is, our cleric, as you said, runs across, grabs her, and despite how ripped Patrick Wilson looks, she kind of overpowers him a little bit, her weight, and he ends up basically almost falling out of the window. He ends up grabbing, I believe, the shade, and kind of using that to hold himself up.
And you got this great shot of, all of the runs in the shade just kind of coming apart one by one as he's hanging on there, rain tearing into his face, all of that. Yep.
And then outside, we have Lorraine, who at this point had gone back to kind of the front of the house. She was... I can't remember this one. She had a revelation, because I'm assuming she has a revelation before she watches her husband hanging out the window.
I don't believe she. Well, I think the second she sees the lightning strike the tree, she realizes, okay, this is the moment. This is what that premonition was talking about.
Yeah, well, I mean, at this point, because I believe she went out back again, and then she kind of came back around because she realizes that she wrote down the name.
Oh, yeah.
So their scratchings earlier were the name of the Bible, which she kind of spells out, which is the name of Valak. Or Valak, sorry.
Valak, yeah. And then that's the same name that was in their house, kind of distributed throughout that scene in the study where the nun invaded the Warrens' household, too. It's like, we saw the name, we knew the name, it was interesting, but now she makes that connection as well.
And then she has a pretty easy time of it getting up into the house, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I guess the nun's a little distracted watching, him hanging over there, but I feel like the nun could have done a little bit more.
Yeah, I think at that point she was more concerned with attacking Patrick Wilson and Janet's as well. And I guess, yeah, Lorraine just kind of slipped her mind.
I can't blame her. But yeah, so she comes into the room, sees what's going on, and Valak kind of uses their force powers and pushes her up against the wall. In a pretty good scene.
Yeah.
I thought like that, the kind of the expanse between them and kind of the wind and everything looked awesome. And then, Lorraine has to come in with panic, and then she realizes she kind of decides that if she says the name, she has power over the demon. That's kind of the lore they put into place, is that once you know the name of a demon, you have power over it. And I believe that they say the same thing in the Insidious series as well. I think that they kind of have that common thread, where having the name of a demon puts you in control of it.
Vaguely remember that.
And do you find it weird? So she learns the demon's name is Valak, and I don't know if this is like an established demon, like if they know demons' names. But she fucking lists off the longest fucking title of this. She's like, you are Valak, the Defiler, the fucker of mothers, the third, the junior. And it's just like, and I swear to God, Valak was just like, holy shit, I have she fucking gives him so many titles.
No, the best part is she actually doesn't, because I remember I was looking for this on my second watch, though. She doesn't actually say his name, or her name, until the very, very end. Like, you are the demon of sin, you are the, you are the Defiler, you are this, you are that, and the whole time Patrick Wilson is hanging on by a thread, and I could just picture him going, okay, honey, hurry it up. And then finally she goes, you are Valak, and then that's when demon explodes into butterflies or whatever it is.
Well, I can't remember. Is she like, yo, Valak, you need to leave? Or she just say his name and he's like, I'm out.
Yeah, I think she said something like, your name is Valak and I banish you, or something like that. But, yeah.
Now, here's my question. If you have control over them by knowing their names, kind of like an Aragon, isn't that? Oh, fuck, that is an Aragon. Yeah, terrible book. But if that's the case, can you be like, yo, Valak, now go get me some fucking candy from the store down the street? Like, if you can command it with just its name, it's like, Valak, stop this shit. Go fuck those people up who keep they should have kept Valak around. Bring it to their talk show.
Valak, you were such a disappointment. Come on, Valak. I told you to run my errands, Valak. We're out of peanut butter, Valak.
From what I'm hearing, based on the nun, Valak is a disappointment. But yeah, so that banishes Valak, and I think at that point, then she runs across and helps Ed, who, I'm not gonna lie, dude, he is hanging by a moment for like ever.
Yeah.
Like, the calling could have played their entire song, and he would have been doing it. Like, it's, I feel like he has like a solid 7 minutes of just like holding her.
Yeah, it takes forever.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I feel like he could have gotten out of that, or maybe like kind of tossed her to the side, like some of the people outside who were watching, be like, "Yo, guys, come here." Toss the girl to him.
It's only one floor. Like,
there
were
ways
some
to do
bushes
that.
and stuff too.
Yeah, it's just avoid the one place with the giant spear sticking out of it. Like,
yeah.
come on, Patrick Wilson. But yeah, so okay, so you want to tell? So what happens after that? What's our following action?
So after that, the day is saved, the demon is banished, the mystery is solved. They go over to Valak and they pull off her mask, and it ends up being Old Man Withers in the haunted amusement park, and the Scooby Gang just goes back home. After that, so they pull it on in. There's an establishing shot where they sit there, and Patrick Wilson gives Janet his very, very important cross he got when he was a kid and says, "This protected me, and that'll protected you too." And I remember sitting there thinking, Ed Warren, you have a daughter. Why are you not giving your own daughter this? This is, yeah.
Bro, they have so many crosses at their house.
I guess that's true. So that was that, and I remember there's one scene where we see the dog. The dog does not die. The dog who turned into the Crooked Man, that was not the actual dog. The real dog is fine, so thankfully. I'm very happy that happens. And they basically ride off into the sunsets. And the movie closes with a slow dance between Ed and Lorraine of Elvis again. I can't help fall in love with but you, or can't stop falling in love with you. No, I can't help fall in love with you. And I'm expecting a jump scare, but there's no jump scare. And then the credits roll, and they display all of the visions of the pictures of the real events that this movie was inspired by. Oh, I forgot one scene. So we do have a scene at the very end where they take the Crooked Man spectrometer, I think it is, or spectroscope, and they put it in their little trophy room based of all the hauntings that they've established. The Annabelle doll is back there. I'm sure something from the first movie is there. And then
Samuel... It's like a music box in the first movie?
Yeah, the music box in the first movie, I guess. And then Samuel L. Jackson comes on out, and he says, we're putting together a team, and they're calling it the Conjuring Initiative. Are you in? And they both nod and give each other a high five, and then Imagine Dragons starts playing, and the movie ends. So,
Best film. Well, and I can't remember. I have some vague recollection. I thought that at one point, like, the Annabelle doll, like, broke out of the case at the end of the first movie of The Conjuring, but maybe I'm thinking it's some weird flashback from the end of the first Annabelle.
Yeah,
but I could have sworn that at one point the Annabelle doll goes missing.
It's definitely not in the second movie. Annabelle doll's there, still in its case. As far as I know, it doesn't break out or anything like that.
Maybe it's the end of the first one, because I swear to God, Annabelle like disappears at one point, and they're kind of setting up the sequel, and I was kind of like, where's Annabelle?
Because Annabelle came up before The Conjuring 2, so that would make more sense timeline wise.
Yeah,
I really got to see the first one.
But Annabelle takes place before the first Conjuring anyway.
Yeah.
Actually,
yeah, that's true. But yeah, so that's The Conjuring 2 right there. So overall, I think we're both fairly similar opinions on this. We both think it's a very solid horror movie. There's some great scares. But it really doesn't do too much new. It doesn't really push the horror genre at all. Would you agree with that?
I'd agree. I'd say it doesn't push the horror genre, but it does, like, it's a shining example of it.
It's horror movie comfort food.
Yeah,
that's kind of what it feels to me. Like it does things very, very well.
I kind of feel like it's like the Christopher Nolan Batman. It's the Christopher Nolan version of this story. It's the well-made, well-acted, well-shot version.
Sounds good. It looks like we hit all our talking points too.
Well, actually, since we're talking about this one, like, where do you think this lies in terms of the Conjuring universe they've set up so far, the James Wan filmography? Where do you see it?
In terms of where I would rank it, or in terms of where I think it's going? I mean, the only two James Wan movies I've seen are Annabelle and the... Oh, in terms of... Okay. Are we specifically Conjuring universe, or specifically all of his movies?
We'll say the Wanverse.
Okay. The Wanverse, I would definitely place it above Annabelle. I'd say it's probably on par with Insidious. I really like the setting of this one. I like the English setting. I liked the whole... I feel the theme of family was done a lot stronger here than it was in Insidious. The heartwarming moments hit a lot harder. I liked the whole family banding together and the love story between Ed and Lorraine. I felt the two lead actors did a great job with the chemistry between the two in terms of portraying an old, established, married couple who have been at this and know each other super, super well than the dad and his son from Insidious. So I would probably rank it one of the higher ones. I do hear the first Conjuring is generally accepted to be a lot better than this one, though.
Really?
Yeah. Would you agree with that?
I don't know. I really like the first one, but I think that that those themes of family in this one kind of elevate it for me. Like I liked the first one. I think the first one again was a very good kind of ghost story, I guess. But I kind of thought I thought the sequel brought more to the table.
Okay.
For me.
Cool. Now the real question is, going from the James Wan verse, how does it compare to Furious 7? Because he also directed that as well.
Well, I have not seen a single Fast and Furious movie. I'm not going to lie.
I have not either. So we're going to say,
Oh, I'm sure Patrick Wilson had a great role in it. That's all I know. I'm sure he was the best drug running biker that they ever had.
And then Fast Furious 7, it's all about family too. So there we go. We've got that common theme.
Right.
Oh man. I really like the scene in Fast Furious 7 where they talk about, we're all about family here. No, I like the scene in Conjuring 2 where Vin Diesel comes on in and gives the entire English family a pep talk saying, listen, you are all family here. And families stick together, no matter what. And then he just leaves. And then everyone's just like, who was that guy? And then Patrick Wilson just gives a wink to the audience.
And I gotta say, I don't know if it's too soon or not, but the Paul Walker ghost cameo in 7, that was... It not only was it kind of sad, but in the fact that he couldn't leave the car that he would died in, but
I'm glad you made a Paul Walker joke because I was too afraid to, so now I'm just like, all right, there we go.
I'm sure he's a great guy, so, rest in peace. But actually, speaking of that theme of family, do you know who the main actress is in The Nun?
No, I do not.
So it's actually, I don't know how to pronounce her name. I think it's Taissa Farmiga. So it's Vera Farmiga's either daughter or sister.
Uh-huh.
So, and they look the exact same. Like, it's insane how much they look alike. Oh, it's her sister. So I believe that The Nun kind of ties into this in the sense that, like, part of the reason that The Nun is, terrorizing specifically the Warrens is because I think they're tying in some kind of, the theory I think is that the nun that kind of fights Valak, the other nun in The Nun, that's a weird sentence, is related to them. So it's kind of like they're descendants of them.
Gotcha.
So I think they're trying, with the Conjuring universe, they're trying to build it in more and more. Like, I've also heard that at the end there's a twist that connects it to like the first Conjuring movie. So I kind of like that these movies that, even though The Nun seems like, oh, this can introduce who Valak is, they're making it kind of a long-term project, a long-term focus on the Warrens, and everything that relates to them is kind of goes deeper than just the tertiary level of these guys who bump into the demons.
Yeah, and I'm really okay with that. I really hope that they still establish that these are all very standalone movies. Like, if you go to see Infinity War without having seen any of the other Marvel movies, you're going to be super lost. And I don't want them to have a final accumulating, horror movie extravaganza, the Conjuring Initiative, or whatever you want to call it. I like the Easter eggs. I like how they're all connected. But I just really hope they all stand together on their own.
I agree, because I think one of the things I think is lacking with the Insidious verse is I feel like they introduced the Red Devil, the lipstick face man, Darth Maul, whatever you want to call him. They introduced him in the first movie, and they basically teased him in every movie since. At the end of it, they kind of just have, oh, there he is. Oh, there he is.
Just pops up again beside someone's shoulder.
Basically, like he's in the second one because the second one takes place concurrently at times with the first one.
Okay. Is the third one a prequel, or?
The third one is a prequel, and I believe so is the fourth. I can't remember the fourth. But anyway, like the red faced demon does appear in both of them, and he appears at the end of the second one. He appears like in the shadows at the end of the third one, and like they're trying to like that's like obviously one of the characters is the same. The paranormal investigator is the same in all of them. She kind of appears in all of them, but they're trying to create this greater arc with the red-faced demon. I thought they're going to try to bring it back at some point, and it's just tiring to watch.
Yeah,
because I just kind of like you were saying. I think kind of drawing out this big villain coming back thing, I think would be a terrible mistake. And I'm glad that Valak, he's not dead, but he or she gets destroyed at the end of the second one. Kind of, she's gone. And in Annabelle, even though it's coming back, and I think they're doing the third one. They announced the third Conjuring. I feel like they're not. It's the reoccurring villain isn't like the same villain. Like, even Annabelle kind of doesn't feel the same between the two movies. They're very standalone. It's terrorizing separate families. The families aren't the same. It's not like a revenge pact or anything.
Yeah, because the nun was obviously a very, very big part of this movie, but they don't really delve into the nun's motivations and where she came from and all of that stuff right there. And the same thing with the first movie. Annabelle played a role in the first movie, right?
Yes. Like, Annabelle was kind of, how we had the opening scene in this one with the Amityville Horror? Yeah. That was the Annabelle scene in the first one. It was referencing the first time that they kind of interacted with Annabelle.
So, like, my interest is piqued, but it's not the main focus of the movie. The nun, we can see how the nun met her ends, quote-unquote, in The Conjuring 2, but, this character was fantastic. I'm still interested to hear where she came from and all of that stuff right there. And I feel that's a good way to put it. They're delving deeper into the universe, but it's still very standalone. They're connecting the spider webs here and there, but it's not a whole big, mess like in those old detective movies where you've got the yarn and the pictures and the thumbtacks up on the corkboard and, you're moving back and forth. Where is Pepe Silva? Pepe Silva never existed. That sort of thing. So
yeah, and it's nice, too, because there's, like, for example, like in Annabelle 2, which I think is probably better than the first one, they even allude to the nun. They have a sister who knows who you kind of see a picture of, and you kind of see that in the background. And there's a point where a ghost appears at one point, and it looks kind of like the nun. Mm-hmm. And again, it takes place kind of in between the Nun and the Conjuring verse, or the Conjuring films. And they're just nods. They're not like shoving it in your face. Like, here's the Nun. It's just kind of like, oh, there she is, and she's gone. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's the way to do it. Like little nods. Like, it's like having like the Oscorp Tower in the back of the Avengers movie or something like that. Mm-hmm. Like it's not shoving in your face. It's just hey, by the way, like these are the same universe, and if they're theoretically third-party demons possessing things. Maybe they hang out a little bit. Maybe they have fun.
Mm-hmm. They have their big parties in the back.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. All right, cool. Well, any other thoughts on The Conjuring 2?
No, I think if you haven't seen it, you probably should. It's really fucking good.
Solid movie, and I need to go back and I need to watch the first one. It's on Netflix too, so.
I think you need to watch that, and I think you should watch the other Annabelle movie.
Yeah, Creation 2. Okay, so here's the question for you. Which one do you think is better, Conjuring 1 or Annabelle Creation? Because I know you were a huge fan of the first Annabelle.
I don't know. I wouldn't say I'm a huge fan. I just really enjoy it. Mm-hmm. Wait, what do you think about the original Annabelle?
That could be another podcast entirely like that. I thought it was good. I definitely don't think it's deserved all the criticism it got. I had some great scares. The ending, I felt like they were going for something with that baby at the end, and I really, really wish they had went with it.
Yeah.
Because that would have been like the mist level of just horrifying, depressing endings. Mm-hmm. But they didn't, and they kind of cheapened out of that. So, overall, I thought it was a decent movie.
To me, so I think part of the reason I love that movie, because I don't think it'd be worth doing a full episode on, but I think there's that one scene where she's there in the room, and you see Annabelle kind of standing next to those drapes, and it kind of lifts up, and you're like, oh shit, it's levitating. Mm-hmm. But then it kind of, I think it's hilarious. That's probably why I love this movie. Is then you just see the demon behind it, like lifting the doll up, and it kind of adds that sense of realism. Like, if this doll were moving around, like theoretically, there is some demon just carrying this doll around, like putting it in places, like bumping it into shit, and it makes it so much more fun.
Yeah, I think we just solved Elf on the Shelf. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. There's some demon walking around, tossing elf, and it's like holding it like a little fucking like mannequin, just like walking around, like, moving it places, like positioning it, and like all I can think about is like, in later movies when it appears, like, is this demon just like, I'm gonna carry it over here and put it down, and I'm gonna move it over here. It adds so much agency and so much intention to these demons. That's just fucking hilarious. And like, I love that idea that like, it's like with Sam Raimi's universe where the demons just kind of fuck around and like, they're over the top, but like, why the fuck wouldn't you be? Like, you're an immortal demon who's just messing around. Like, I think that seeing behind the curtain is just so fascinating, and even though it's cheesy, to me it just makes it a better movie. It makes it so much more interesting.
All right, we'll have to talk about it maybe in a future episode. But yeah. All right, cool. So that's been The Conjuring 2. Thank you so much for listening. I am Dan.
And I'm Andrew.
And we will see you next time.
Woo.